Good. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. My name is Michael Kambroff. I'm a BPM and EA consultant for the BUC Group, and I'm also the account manager for our next presenter. Business process management and enterprise architecture are intricate management domains, and their adoption always comes with various challenges as well as exciting new opportunities. Every such adoption and implementation project has a story, and to tell us that story about Novartis today, we have Piyush and Dev. Let's give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Piyush, and I have Devanand with me. We are from Novartis. Novartis is a pharmaceutical company, certainly one of the largest pharma companies in the world. We have 110,000 employees. That number is dated 2021. Our revenue last year was approximately 52 billion US dollars, just to tell you the scale at which we operate. Now, in terms of our presentation, we would cover three major portions. First is what has been our journey so far. Yeah. I think we are one of the customers of BOC who are utilizing both of their important tools, Adonis and AdoIT. Yeah. So as Mike suggested, the journey has not been that easy so far. But yeah, it's been a fruitful one that I can certainly highlight. Now, after covering that journey and what all customizations, add-ons, etc., we have implemented so far, we would talk about how we are using these tech stacks in our digital transformation initiatives. Because for us, we definitely are into innovative medicine business, but digital transformation, re-engineering, optimization, standardization is what we do on a daily basis. Yeah? So these tools are helping us in going further, in going that edge. Yeah? Last but not the least, we would cover our plans for future. Okay, so first question, why Adonis? Yeah? We started with this question in late 2019. And we had a robust BPM/BPA tool at that time. We were using Nimbus. It's a TIBCO product. The problem, and it's not highlighted here, the problem that we had with Nimbus was it was a multi-tenant application, which means we had HR processes in a different application and finance processes in a different application. There were no handshakes. There were no standards. There were standards for each of those domains, but we didn't had a one Novartis process architecture, which was really, really not helping us in doing that digital transformation. For example, if I want to go into SAP S/4HANA journey, all my processes should be together, because unless they are together, I will never be able to understand the impact of that change. And then unless and until I understand the impact, how will I scale up? So that was the major challenge we were facing with Nimbus. In terms of our requirements, yeah, because in terms of scale, we have approximately 800 process modelers. And these are people who are actually working on Adonis on a day-to-day basis, defining their processes. Then there are process owners, process leads, etc., etc. So the quantum of people utilizing Adonis is huge, which is why our requirements were also pretty differentiated in a way. Yeah? First and foremost, we wanted a web-based modeling tool. Second, we wanted inbuilt governance, because creating process is one thing, but governing is another. The life cycle of the process should be governed properly, otherwise you are not creating process architecture, you are creating mess. Because gradually, you will not be able to get value out of process architecture. Third, it should be user-friendly, because otherwise adoption of a tool like Adonis would go for a toss. So it should be simple, it should be user-friendly, interface should be good, experience should be excellent. it should certainly have analysis and reporting capabilities, because without reporting, how will you utilize what you have documented? Then process cataloging, process architecture was another important point. What are the level ones? How can you differentiate level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4? That was pretty important for us. And last but not the least, since Novartis has roughly 18,000 applications, it is really important for us to integrate and form a robust EA. And we'll talk about how we have integrated Adonis, Adwaiti, and several other applications, because that ecosystem is important. And then unless and until you have that ecosystem, the results or the reporting or the analysis that is of no use. So we needed a tool which offers easy integration capabilities as well. Then one important factor that's not mentioned here is the dollar value, because money is important. We wanted to get a tool which is not that costly as well. In terms why we selected Adonis, certainly it provides web-based modeling, and it offers or is compliant to BPMN 2.0 standards. Because, as I said, there are multiple people who are modeling. If we don't stick to standard, we will have same role defined 20 times, or maybe 200 times, which is important. Second, work group offered us trainings, because there was a huge change that we were going to go. Yeah? Nimbus follows UPN, Adonis follows BPMN, and they are completely different in the way how the process modeling is done. So the support we got in terms of training our people, in terms of helping us in setting up standards, helping us in terms of how we can better govern our system, certainly work group provided us that support. Now, because of all this, because of the requirements that we mentioned and because of the factors that I mentioned, we selected Adonis in late 2020. So it's been more than 2 years with Adonis. And yeah, we will cover more details about Adonis. But before that, let me hand over to Dave, who will cover why we selected Adwaiti as well.
Thank you, Piyush. Apologies if I mumble a little bit. It's been like 2.5 years of talking through Skype and Zoom and all those things. And it's really good to see a lot of people here right now. So we chose Adwaiti for various reasons, which are pretty much clear here and self-explanatory. The primary challenges are the issues that we wanted to address in the architecture practices was, as Piyush mentioned, like we have around 18,000 applications. Now they are divided into various crown jewels and all those categories. And as a part of architecture practices, it is important for us to maintain an architecture handbook for all the applications. Now the architecture handbook that we talk about is mostly covering the entire EA structure of business, system, integrations, and all the aspects of that application, which is mandatory, and you have to document everything in the EA repository. The earlier platform that we are using was pretty much like open for everybody to do whatever they want. We were not getting the value out of a EA tool because it was not giving the accurate picture of our architecture landscape. If somebody says SAP, you will find like hundreds of instances of SAPs. How do you understand like which SAP we are talking about? If somebody cannot find the object or the application in the repository, they go ahead and create their own application component. That way we are losing the value of the platform. That's when we kind of started thinking like, no, we have to come out of this mentality of keeping an open EA platform, and we have to form a strong governance. We have to give a platform which SaaS-based with integration capabilities and all that. So governance was very important for us, and that's how we landed into Adwaiti. We did a very long POC of 6 months to finalize the tool. We are very thorough in terms of moving into a direction. So it was quite an interesting exercise in terms of comparing all the other leaders versus Adwaiti. And it kind of checked all the boxes that we really wanted to achieve through the EA practices. And We also opted for, there are a lot of things that we want to talk about, but it is not there in the presentation. Archimate as one of the key notation for documenting the architecture. But the only thing there was, Archimate is quite vast. And when we have to train, and training architects, it's like hundreds of architects across the geographies. So if you talk about the domain architects, we have around 100. If you talk about solution architects, they are like, again, all of them have access to the platform, and they are responsible for their applications, their architecture modeling. Now, bringing everybody on the same page is a massive effort. It took like months and months of training. We gave them Archimate training as well, but at the same time, we kind of went outside the box in terms of what Archimate asked us to, like, we should keep it open for everybody. But we opted for a completely different approach. We created our own meta model within the Archimate, because as earlier it was said, when you connect two applications, you are like given n number of relationships. Now, if you have to teach each and every individual across the geography, like this is the relationship that you need to choose, it will be very tough because they have other aspects of things to handle as well, rather than remembering the relationships. So we kind of created a governance around the ADOIT in terms of what relationships between two components are important, what components are required for you to model. We didn't open the entire Archimate. It will be like a big mess otherwise. We will not have clarity in terms of what the person XYZ is talking about. So doing that, what happened is the whole understanding of if anybody is documenting any architecture, it is understandable across the geography. If somebody is documenting the integration architecture, anybody from any business domain will be able to understand, okay, this is the integration architecture, this is how it works. This is the business architecture, this is how it works. So we restricted the entire adoption. So that governance was very important in terms of the whole EA implementation, moving into the next steps from the earlier EA practices. Then in terms of business capabilities also, so we also have a very strong structure around business capabilities as well. And that is also very strongly governed. And so we have passed those milestones in terms of how do we define business capabilities, how do we govern and manage them. So we are in the next stage in terms of how do we derive values out of those business capabilities through the architecture landscape and all the other aspects around that.
Do you want to show the meta model first?
1 second. There's another aspect meta model would be a good idea. So we are a pharma company. We kind of very closely guarded our documentations and everything. So that's why you will not see a lot of things in the, but I would like to share this.
So this is basically our production environment that we are showing you.
Just to give you a highlight, this is the entire capability landscape for Novartis. You can go and drill down into each and every aspect of them to the application level as well. But I want to show you something else which is on the meta model side. Did I miss it?
You can search.
Yeah, this one. So this is the Archimate meta model that we defined for our company. And what happened is we restricted in terms of what all objects you can use in a particular layer of, so if you're talking about strategies, these are the only objects that is available for you to model. If you're talking about business, then all the relationships that are required for you to document or document the architecture handbooks, this is how we kind of structured and restricted them. This was necessary because not everybody was comfortable with the whole learning of Archimate. We wanted to reduce that learning curve, knowing the complexity of how many architects we have, and bringing everybody on the same page was really difficult. So that's why we had to restrict the whole space into limited options. If anybody has any questions, you can jump in this space. I'll go back to the presentation. It was not a very easy for the BOK group as well to take us as a customer, because we are very kind of picky and choosy in terms of how we want to use things or what we want in there. We go by out of the box, but at the same time, there are a lot of customizations that we dumped into the BOK group. We want this, we want that, this will not work. One of the primary reasons for that was we have very structured golden source of truth in terms of applications. So ServiceNow is there. It is the primary source for anything about applications, application components, and technology. That's it. You are not supposed to use any other platform. If there is a garbage there, it is your responsibility or the team's responsibility. I'll talk about like how they all go hand in hand in terms of maturing individual platforms. Then process, Adonis is responsible for that. And similarly, for data, we have EBX platform like that. So every aspect of various domains were strictly governed and managed by the separate teams, and they are responsible for the data. There were a lot of customizations that we did in ADIT. For example, the integrations with platforms which were not out of the box, which were required because they were the master source, golden source of truth for all the information. Release workflow, we had to customize a little bit from what was available there because we needed some additional steps and approvers in between. There were quite an interesting thing in terms of object merge, which is quite vague when you read it here. Since our golden source of truth were defined ServiceNow, now architects were not allowed to create applications just because they feel like creating one. They are supposed to leverage what is already integrated or imported into the platform. And in a scenario where you have to talk about future, which is not into the other source. For example, I want to introduce a new application into the business space, and that application does not exist in any of the system. So in a scenario like that, you architect the model, you architect everything in ADIT. When the application goes live into the system, in those systems, that's when you kind of merge them together so that there's no additional effort in terms of cross-checking whether it is appropriate or not. It directly syncs to the exact source of information. Then alias, that was quite important for us because every organization has their own naming convention. And naming convention also was very strictly monitored in Novartis. And it looks very weird if you have numbers in front of it and some platform which has no clue about what actually the platform is. So that way it was a little bit of disconnect in terms of if somebody is looking at a platform, is that the same application they are talking about? So alias was important in terms of the architects so that they can create an alias which is easy for anybody to understand and adopt in terms of why that object or what exactly that object is known in generic space. Simplified creation of instance. So we have a structured global reference library which kind of imports data from all the other source systems. You're not supposed to recreate those objects, you're supposed to reuse them. And at the same time, you're not supposed to pick them directly. You can create an instance of it. So that was one of the customization that we opted for. So that when I choose Windows Server, I can see all the instances which are documented in multiple models. Now, knowing hundreds of architects, if they use a single object for all the models, it will be very cumbersome in terms of when we are doing the impact analysis. It will kind of result into a number of things. In the Adonis space also, we took quite a lot of add-ons, ideation, customer journey. I think most of you are aware of process simulations. Both the platforms have the Ask ADIT mobile as well, so that they can go through the entire repository at the convenience of anywhere from the locations. Then they both are from the same BOC group, but the integration is again, since we are strongly governed in terms of integration as well, so the integration also happened through API gateways and everything. So those integrations was important in the ADIT and Adonis. The other challenging space here was the GXP, since we are pharma, and GXP, being a GXP compliant is very important. So we have to follow certain rules and regulations in terms of integrations as well. There were quite a lot of interesting changes in the Adonis space as well, like visualization of controls. There were no visualization aspects that were available out of the box. Conditional color change of task, so based on various conditions. Piyush can talk about that in detail. I will quickly jump into the ecosystem. So we have the master data platform, we have the APM CMDB, separate team altogether. Then there's this technology stack which is maintained in SharePoint. So all those information is fed into ADIT. They are primary, all those systems are responsible for maintaining their data. Now how this works is, if an architect is working on their platform and if they see the application is not appropriate, it is their responsibility to trigger the appropriate actions to the respective repository, so that all of them mature together and they kind of fill each other's, whatever their gap is, whatever the issues is. So that's it, kind of a handshake that happens between all the repositories. And CMDB ServiceNow, it's quite a massive platform, and definitely there's a lot of garbage, which is quite common in all the CMDB platforms. But at the same time, that handshake is very important in terms of, and the responsibility and accountability of those platforms is very important. That's why how we have this integration, but at the same time we enforce the respective teams in terms of maintaining and ensuring that the data quality is appropriate. So that kind of understanding between all the teams is there. That's how we are able to achieve a lot of maturity in the entire platform. I will hand it over to...
No, you have to cover the ADIT one.
Which one? Okay, one more thing is left. It is quite self-explanatory in terms of business objective, approach, and benefits. The governance that I was talking about, it was quite important for us, and how the benefits that we are reaping out of ADIT is in terms of the merger and acquisitions that we keep on going through. Now, since we have all the information, all the data in ADIT, the decision making is becoming a lot more easier. There are some shortcomings which we are addressing with, as we are very picky and choosy. So we are bothering ADIT BOC group on those spaces as well. So we have all the relationships, applications, landscape, all those things very well defined. Now the transition between one platform to the other platform, one organization to the other organizations, those are the decisions that we are now able to make out of ADIT. So when we separate, so as you must have heard of Sandoz separation with the Novartis. So ADIT is playing a major role in the whole transition space. It is helping the organization in terms of understanding their landscape, what application they should carry forward, what application they should leave, why they should leave, and so all those complexity, all those complex decisions are being very well managed by ADIT right now, which is quite commendable because it's a very big landscape in terms of number of applications that we are talking about in that space as well. All that was possible just because of ensuring the governance in terms of what data we are feeding into the system. So it is very vital in terms of what you are feeding into the system and for what reason you are feeding into the system. If you're clear about that, then you can reap the benefits out of all those information to the platform. I think, yeah.
Now is the time.
Thanks. Now it's your time.
Thank you, Dev. In terms of Adonis, we are into SAP S/4HANA transformation. It's a 5-year gigantic program for us. We call it as LDC, which is Lean Digital Core. And we are using Adonis as our process blueprinting tool to go to SAP S/4HANA. Yeah? I would not read through the slides, but basically what we are trying to do is, as I mentioned about cataloging, so we have as-is repository and to-be repository. As we speak, we are migrating our 18,000 processes from Nimbus to Adonis, because that is also important. It could not be done automatically, because Nimbus is UPN and Adonis is BPMN. So we have hired a service provider who is migrating all those processes manually. It would be completed by this year end. Now that would be leveraged as a baseline. Until that time, the LDC team is still working on the areas which were not any which ways defined in the earliest Nimbus version. Yeah? And then once the blueprinting is complete, it would be leveraged as a baseline to define the 2B processes. And then those 2B processes would be utilized for that technology transformation. On a high level, this is how we are trying to use Adonis for LDC. We are also in a journey of implementing Workday, which is the HR system. We are going to replace SAP HR Core. And for that transformation also, we are utilizing Adonis to help us in standardizing the process blueprint. Quickly moving to way forward. In the connected ecosystem that we showed so far, there are a couple of more integrations that we want to get into our application landscape very quickly. One is integration with Confluence. This is planned for next year. The problem currently we have is the solution that Bock offers is only for the on-prem version, not for the cloud version, and we use the Confluence Cloud. So I hope Bock will surely help us very soon so that we can get this integration done. Exactly. Then there is another add-on module from Bock, which is Mona. It is utilized to capture adoption. So we have implemented Adonis at OIT, but my leadership wants to know how many people are using it on a day-to-day basis. I have some ClickSense dashboards which we are right now developing manually, but once we implement Mona, it would be all automatic. And we would then integrate Mona with ClickSense so that all those KPIs are available in dashboard format. In terms of process orchestration solutions, we use Appian as our process orchestration standard. But there is a lot of problem that the business teams are facing in terms of governing those orchestration solutions, because the business process gets changed, but the technical solution of that process is completely different to how the business process is now. So we want to utilize Adonis as the governing baseline for all orchestration solutions as well. Last but not the least is Org Portal for AdOIT, because right now these architecture models are domain-wise, but we all want to club it into a pyramid structure so that we go from level 1 to the deepest level. And as I said, Workday, once the Workday is deployed, we want to integrate it with Adonis so that roles are also mastered. Obviously, they will be mastered in Workday, and then we get those roles from Workday to our global reference library in Adonis. Because we don't want to replicate or duplicate information in the connected ecosystem that we are trying to build. I think I am over time, and that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Dev. Do we have any questions from the audience? All right. Let's start here.
I have two questions. You guys mentioned release workflow. Is that automated or is it like a process-wise?
So we have release workflow in both Adonis and Adwaiti. Adonis offers its out of box. So basically what happens is whenever you create a process model, it is in draft stage. Then it moves into methodical review. So as I said, process modelers, our process modeling team is basically decentralized, which means each business function has their process excellence team. Now, we have a centralized team which governs these standards. Yeah? So that team has methodical reviewers, and those review the sanctity of the model from BPMN's perspective, from Novartis standards perspective. So from draft, it moves to methodical review, and then it goes back to the business as the business review. And this entire workflow is automated in Adonis.
Okay. How about Adwaita?
In Adwaita, it was not available. We took support from Bock, and similar structure is now available in Adwaita as well.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. And the second question, you have this master data platform, you said in SharePoint, right? And is it connected to Adwaita? Is it like a direct connection or?
The master data platform is a different platform. It is a EBX platform. It is integrated with Adwaita via API gateway.
Okay.
There's another SharePoint portal which is a manual import. Excel
manual
based.
import,
Yeah,
okay.
the SharePoint thing is manual.
Yep. And
Thank
EBX holds data objects and business objects.
We will planning to get rid of that SharePoint thing, and we'll probably move in adopting Adwaita directly.
Good answer. We have a quick question here.
The meta model you specified in Adwaita, is that technically forced on the models, or is that?
Yes, it is technically forced. Otherwise, if you have n number of things to pick from, you generally go and pick whatever
that's the
suits
reason
you.
why I asked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
No, it's simple. We have 300 plus architects. If we don't enforce them, we will create mess. Sorry.
And architects love to be creative. They love beautiful diagrams. So yeah, we have to restrict that creativity.
Any further questions from the audience?
There's
Okay,
one.
right there.
In the meantime, you reach there. I was talking about the ClickSense dashboards. These are the ones that we have manually created, both for Adonis and Adwaita.
Well, where you said that towards the S4 migration, the 2B processes are modeled in a different Adonis repository.
Yes.
And but who's doing the modeling?
So for 2B modeling, there is a specific team in LDC who are doing the 2B modeling. And as I said, we are doing that Nimbus to Adonis migration, which is as is. That's done by the different team.
But have you considered going with the standard SAP processes?
They are very low level. We want complete business architecture. As I said, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those processes are 4 and basically 5 and 6. So we want that complete architecture in place.
Okay, thank you.
So I have briefly shown the business capability space. So the capability space is neutral to the org structure and all the other things. So the process comes at the level 5, and the capability is till the level 4. So like that, it is structured.
Any final questions before we move forward? Thank you. Then, gentlemen, thank you once again. Good. And to wrap things up, thank you. I'll just assume that was for me. Okay. To wrap things up, what we really want to talk about just for a few more moments is one of our components. It's a component that is used by many of our clients, including Novartis, and it's a component that allows companies like Novartis to really accelerate and take their process optimization to the next level. And this is our process simulation component. So the simulation itself focuses on a few critical factors, mostly time, costs, and probability. Users can define the times it takes to execute a process, including the individual tasks. They can do the same thing for the costs, both from a personnel and non-personnel perspective. And they can also define probabilities. Probabilities are typically defined on the level of decision in every process. So every time we have a decision, that means the process can split into multiple flows. And very often, there's different probabilities of how those flows might then subsequently lead into different outcomes. So on the one hand side, of course, users are able to define that, and the simulation component allows us to then analyze these probabilities and then define critical information and insights about the different paths in the process. So in that context, as you can see in the upper right-hand side of the screen, or actually, yeah, my left, your right, you can then define information about the critical paths in the process, and you can derive data about what we would call your happy path, which is the path that would lead to the most desirable outcome. And you can think about what you can do to improve the process and ensure that this outcome is reached as many times as possible. As I mentioned, apart from probabilities, we also have times and costs. And the cool thing about the simulation component is that you can not only analyze a single process, but you can also simulate multiple processes at the same time and run a comparison. This is very valuable whenever you have a core process and that process has different variations based on geographical, functional, or political factors, for example. And the simulation component allows you to analyze all these processes side by side and then get different insights about the times, the costs, and the probabilities in a comparison view, such as this one. Last but not least, something that is also quite powerful in the context of this component is capacity analysis. As you get more granular, you're able to identify, again, times and costs on the level of individual tasks, but you're also able to analyze the roles in the process. In that context, you're able to consider the roles in a process, or many processes, if you're simulating multiple, and then consider how many FTEs, so full-time equivalents, are required to actually execute the tasks in the process. You can then also gain insights about the times that people spend executing these processes and the costs involved with the time that they spend doing their job. This then creates a very powerful opportunity for automation possibilities and allows you to, of course, think about reducing costs and improving efficiency. So these are some of the main aspects of this component. If you're interested in finding out more, you can talk to me or any of our colleagues. And now we can have another round of applause. Thank you.